Welcome back to Talking Europe. We're here, as you can see, in Strasbourg at the EU Parliament. And with us in studio, we have a centre-right MEP from Luxembourg, former EU Commission Vice President in charge of justice at the time, Miss Viviane Reding. Miss Reding, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your time. Difficult to start without looking at that word justice at the minute. It seems quite a bit of injustice, definitely, for the man on the street in recent times. This Panama Papers scandal, notably, it looks like it hit the heart of Europe. Nearly all countries, all institutions involved.
Well, it hits the whole world because I think it should be very clear that Panama is everywhere. You have these kind of tax havens in the United States, you have them in Great Britain, you have them in Europe, you name it, you get it, you have them everywhere. And the system is the one which we have to fight. Because you started with the man on the street, and the man on the street must feel very uncomfortable. He or she has to pay taxes when it is a woman on the street. And the big ones are avoiding taxes. So I do think that we need, but not only Europe, also the United States, for instance, to find a system where tax avoidance and building strange systems in order to hide illegal money will be fought.
Because indeed, as you're saying, this was a system that was available really for people to use. I know that members of the European Parliament are calling for a committee of inquiry into the Panama Papers. What exactly will that consist of? What will it change?
Well, I hope that it will be a committee of inquiry into all the tax havens, because you have to ask yourself, why did Panama all of a sudden disappear from the blacklist of the OECD? Which were the countries which helped Panama to disappear from this blacklist? Aren't that countries which have tax havens on their own soil? And we should fight the system. It's no use now to go against Panama, and then the Virgin Islands, and then Delaware, and then the constructions in Paris and in London and in New York. I mean, we have really to fight the system. That's the only way in order to have some coherence in our taxation system.
And given that those systems, they are our systems, our own European systems, I'm sure you were saying there's certain countries that knew about Panama, took it off the blacklist. They're not going to be willing to change, are they?
Well, the pressure of politics and of our citizens could be very forceful this time, so that in the national election campaigns also this should be one of the questions. So it's not about fig leaves now, but it is about really controlling the system, which means also controlling the intermediaries, because it is the banks, it is the tax advisors, it's the law offices which advise their clients to utilize then one of these tax havens around the world.
Yeah, and I mean, the system was there. Now, when the LuxLeaks scandals happened, that was when it was seen that your native country, Luxembourg, was providing very beneficial tax systems for multinational companies. The party you sit with here in Parliament, the European People's Party, didn't want really such an inquiry. Isn't that right? Why was that?
Well, we were agreeing with having a committee which looked at all the systems, because you see, after the LuxLeaks have gone out, we have seen that nearly all member states have a system where they give tax advantages. This is not tax hiding, this is something else. It's giving tax advantages to companies. Now, you have the same thing in more than half of our member states. And that is what the committee found out. And that is on how the new rules and the new legislation, which has been promoted now by the European Commission, is trying to come in. So that there is a fair tax distribution, that companies pay the tax there where they work. Mainly.
Indeed. And the European Commission also looking at how to react to those Panama Papers. Another issue up for vote this week in the European Parliament was the passenger name record idea. Before we talk about that, let's take a quick reminder of what exactly that consists of and where we are on it.
Once the PNR, passenger name record, is put in place, those flying to, from, or through Europe will have their flight information transferred to authorities. Airline companies will have to turn over the passengers' identities, itineraries, home and email addresses, luggage, reservations, and many other personal details. The goal is to detect people who may be involved in terrorist activity.
By collecting and sharing the same information across the EU, we make data comparable and relevant. We cut down the lengthy delays of exchanging information through bilateral agreements, allowing for an expediency which is so vital today in criminal investigations.
Since the terrorist attacks in Paris in November, France has been pushing Europe to adopt the PNR. The French Prime Minister has repeatedly called on MEPs to vote for the directive, which states will then have 2 years to turn into law.
I think that the European PNR offers us another way that could prove effective in the fight against terrorism.
But many criticize the initiative. They say it violates privacy and will not fully protect Europe's citizens. In recent attacks in France and Belgium, the terrorists did not travel by plane. The PNR wouldn't have stopped them. Other critics say the European version of the PNR doesn't go far enough. Each country will have its own separate register and won't be obligated to share information.
Now, Ms. Reding, the passenger name record is a system that really a lot of European countries already have. If I understand correctly, what we were voting on in the EU Parliament was this idea of sharing all the information together, automatically sharing it?
Unfortunately, no. And I am very much afraid that the way this legislation has been drafted is far from being perfect. What we need, and this we have seen with the terrorist attacks in Paris and in Brussels, is to link our police forces, to link our security forces cross-border so that they get the information automatically when they get hold of somebody for reasons of crime, for reasons of terrorism. And that is really lacking. I'm not sure that the new PNR system will be of a great help because it is still individual national systems which are not so much linked, and it is a voluntary system. The states can give out the information or not. But it is a first step in the right direction, and it's always better to have a first step because then you can ameliorate it, you can build on it.
But one wonders, where's the reluctance to having, isn't the whole point, as you say, to share this information? We've seen awful attacks in 2 of our EU member states over the past year or so. Where's the reluctance to sharing the information?
Well, this reluctance is unfortunately existing because we do have already instruments which are very important. For instance, the Schengen Information System, which is meant to gather all informations about criminals all over Europe so that a police officer who arrests a person in Paris knows that this person has done something wrong in Madrid,
and that
for
doesn't
instance.
Work, that system.
Yeah, but half of the member states do not feed in the data
so
to the Schengen
Information. PNR, you fear, will be the same?
I'm afraid, yes. So we need a lot of political pressure so that finally I keep my data for myself, of the security forces and of the governments doesn't prevail anymore.
Well, I know, Ms. Reding, one of your big interests is data protection. We were looking at new regulations on that issue as well this week. What is new? What's going to change? Because people are very afraid. Where is this information going to be held? Who's going to have access to it? What does it become?
Yes, but you see what the Parliament decided this week is of utmost importance because it gives also the very symbolic and value element of what we are doing. Security and protection of personal data go hand in hand because we have made now a new law which covers all the European Union and which is one rule for a whole continent to protect the person's rights, the individual right to the personal data. In the same time, we have made a police law which permits police forces in all the member states to put their hand on the necessary data which they need in order to catch the criminals.
We share with the same rules of what we can do with that information.
Absolutely, where the rules are extraordinarily strongly fixed so that there is no legal uncertainty anymore. So this legislative package, which the Parliament, it's important for police, so for security, is important for the individual who's going to be protected, his personal data is going to protect it, is important for our small and medium companies, for our startup, because they will have one law for the whole continent.
Because some companies were saying it could make costs more expensive.
No, on the contrary.
Okay.
Because today, if you are a company, let's say in Paris, and you want to cover the whole of the European Union, then you have to abide to 28 different data protection laws, sometimes conflicting. Imagine what the cost of this is.
So now you can apply for one and you're covered across.
And you can move into the whole European Union, and also the companies who come from outside to our continent will have to apply the same rules.
Well, maybe we can look at those companies from outside, or countries even from outside. I was reading earlier on this week that there's a China-EU deal in the works. It looks like it could be a lot of money, something like 10 billion euros China's willing to invest in Europe.
Well, China is on a buying tour everywhere, and you know that China is investing a lot in Europe, is also investing a lot in Africa, where it buys whole regions in order to have the products in the ground, which the metals, the rare metals. So this is a deal which could happen or could not happen. It is up to the deal, but China is really on a tour to buy interesting objects.
And I guess the EU is on a tour as well to get that investment with the Juncker plan, that outside investment. We did see recently one EU country turn against a sort of trade agreement, if you like. We saw the Dutch vote against this EU-Ukraine trade agreement. How do you react to that? I know that the Luxembourg foreign minister said referendums really almost shouldn't be allowed, that they're not the way to progress in the EU.
Well, referendum is a very strong right of the citizens, but in countries which are not used to a referendum, like for instance, I know only one country which is really used to it, and that is Switzerland. In other countries, very often you find that people do not answer to the question which is asked, but oppose to something else, to the government, for instance, to a political party they don't like, to a system. So it's dangerous to have referendums on international questions. And we have seen that now in the Netherlands.
Then another question we're looking at is whether or not the UK will decide not to be a member any longer of the European Union. I know a few years ago when that idea of a referendum in the UK was brought up, you were very against the idea that the UK would limit immigration from other EU countries into the UK. How do you feel about the package of reforms that Prime Minister David Cameron got from the EU?
Well, I have taken one decision, and that is never ever to intervene in a national electoral campaign, and this I will also keep. I will speak the 23rd of June.
When the British public have voted, and we're all curious to see how they've done. Finally, the European Parliament was also this week voting on a resolution accusing Poland of undermining democracy. The most recent issue we've seen there is the law surrounding abortion. It seems that they're now trying to make that a criminal offence. Where do you see Poland moving?
Well, Poland is moving to a very autocratic system. And it started, like all those who want to get rid of democracy, with dismantling the superior courts, the constitutional tribunal. We have seen that happen in Romania. We have seen it happen in Hungary. We see it now in Poland. And this is very dangerous. You see what's going on. You have the Constitutional Court in order to block a government making a law which would contradict the national constitution. So these kind of governments don't like when a court says, hey, this law is not what it should be. And then instead of changing the law, they say, let's get rid of those who tell us we are not doing well. So let's get rid of the court. Now, Europe is not only built as a market. Europe is built on values. And the values are inscribed in the treaties. And it is very clear that independent justice is a basis for any democratic state which is in Europe. And so it is only right that mostly on this, the European Union, the Commission, has started to inquire, and the Parliament says, no way, this can't continue.
And do you think, because we have seen a very vocal response from Brussels, from the EU institutions since the Law and Justice Party took over in Poland, but do you not think we've seen some of the same moves? You mentioned it yourself, in Hungary and other countries in the EU. Did we see quite as big a vocal opposition? Action?
Oh yes, when I was Commissioner for Justice, I brought Hungary in front of the court because of the discrimination of the judges. Oh yes, we have been caring for this very forcefully. In Hungary, for instance, they accepted the opinion of the Venice Commission, which is a commission put together by the Council of Europe with wise men and women who are specialists for law, for constitutional law, and who advise if something goes wrong. So Hungary, on the Constitutional Court, has gone back to normal. We managed as a commission at that time to stop Romania dismantle its superior court. Now we have the third case. It's not a nice one.
Okay, but it's good to know that the EU can intervene and get a reaction when it sees fit.
Well, I hope, because we need a strong voice from Poland back. Poland was always a very constructive member, helping Europe to advance. It was also a pacifying member in this area, in the eastern part of our European Union. And since the change of government, I'm sorry to say that this influence of Poland in bringing Europe forward, changing Europe, doing reforms, this influence have gone. We need Poland back. Okay. A democratic, strong Poland, please.
Okay, well, Ms. Reding, we'll see if any Polish people hear your message here on Fonds 24. We're out of time for this show, but thanks indeed for taking time out of the plenary session here in Strasbourg to talk with us. That brings us to the end of this edition of Europe Now. Have a good week.